Welcome back to the Truth Over Comfort show. Today is going to be a pretty quick video. It's again going to be another video in a series of mafia or gangster like activities, laws, or comments from, governments, corporations, military officials, or whatever it may be that represent, mafia like things that you'd see in a film. So this one actually I heard quite a while back, and I thought it wasn't real. So I looked it up, as you always should, before you go around saying to everyone as you like to. Whenever I hear something like that, I always want to go tell a bunch of people. So always look up first. So this is called the Hague Act, and this is generally what it is. It's signed into law in 2002 by George W. Bush. So there's this organization called the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which is a tribunal where any member states sign on to it can be brought to be charged for war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, anything like that. I guess kind of Nuremberg style thing from obviously World War II and the Nazis. And the US has a law. This is in Hague in the Netherlands. The US has a law which says if any of their officials, government, military, or allies, they can use any means necessary by their law in the US to go to that country and get it, basically break their friends back using military force if they feel that's necessary. Any means necessary. Imagine the gangsterness of that. So some people are going to say, yeah, the US isn't signed up to it. You should respect the sovereignty of the country. I agree. I understand that. There'd be people who disagree with international organizations like the ICC, the UN, or the EU and other countries, and they think stuff should be done in-house, and especially in America, where states obviously have power, where they can make laws even against the federal law, which in the UK we obviously don't have with councils and stuff like that. We can't legalize weed in Kent, but the US you can obviously do stuff like that. I understand that, but the US, who is an ardent supporter of international law, or the rules-based international law, as they like to say, who is against human rights abuses, states committing war crimes, and they want to charge Russia with war crimes. They want to isolate them doing stuff like that. So if they're such squeaky clean, and no matter what military adventure the US goes on, it's always legal and war crimes won't be committed. It's funny that not only are they not a member, they have a law that says if you do come after officials for war crimes, we will come after you, and we will come to a sovereign country of the Netherlands, which is part of NATO, and come get them with any means necessary, authorized by law by the President of the United States. It's a big step. So one, what does that do? I mean, if the US does commit war crimes, there's basically no one to come after it, because the ICC is definitely not going to try and do that, because they're going to be scared of the US, and the US is going to have too much pressure for that to ever happen on the Netherlands alone. And they're not going to do that. So it's a pretty good way of a country that does a lot of military stuff, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Yemen, wherever it may be, pre 9/11 too. They obviously did a lot of stuff. Who's going to come after them for war crimes? Because the Pentagon, every time they like to investigate themselves, they're all golden, squeaky clean. The US isn't going to do it. So it's a pretty good strategy. Again, I understand the sovereignty line, but the US doesn't respect other countries' sovereignty. I get it for the common person. You don't want an international organization to trial officials and stuff, but your officials don't care about you. Think about the Constitution. They don't care about the Constitution. They're trying to take away your guns, whatever you may think about it. Surveillance on citizens, the Patriot Act, all this different stuff. And, they just do drone attacks in other countries. They invade. The Iraq war was questionable if it was even legal. And there's just drone attacks on the other side of the world, and say, well, yeah, he was a terrorist. Like, how can they even do that? They don't care about sovereignty. So it's a stupid argument. The US isn't not in the ICC because it upholds sovereignty. It doesn't want to be done for war crimes because it knows it does a lot of dodgy stuff. But again, short video, that's the bulk of it, the rant. And I'm going to read, a couple lines from the actual thing and just from Wikipedia. And then just one last thing of an example, adding on to the gangster-like mafia law this is. I haven't really decided gangster or mafia, so I just keep saying both. I want to make an image for the video, sort of like the moderate rebels one for the grey zone, which I thought was a cool idea. But mine specifically just going to be for videos where I think is something like that. So the American Service Members Protection Act, known informally as the Hague Invasion Act because it's in the Netherlands, is a US federal law which aims to protect the US military and other elected and appointed officials of the United States government against criminal prosecution by the ICC, to which the United States is not party. So what is the ICC? It's pretty new. So the ICC is an intergovernmental organization and international tribunal seated in The Hague, Netherlands. It is the first and only permanent international court with jurisdiction to prosecute individuals for international crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. So where the US keeps saying Russia is the aggressive actor on their neighbor, the US never considered itself the aggressor. It preemptively strikes on Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, because they're aggressive or they're a threat to their own citizens. It is distinct from the International Court of Justice, an organ of the UN that hears disputes between states. So this is only 2002, so it's relatively new, and obviously the US made this law in 2002, so it was, it was a reaction to this. At first I thought maybe they did it because under George W. Bush they had plans for Iraq and stuff like that, but it wasn't that. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, not the benefit of the doubt. It was not that. So just to read you, so this is from the government website. I'm just going to literally read 3 lines. Not much to it. This is the government website. Be in the show notes. So, authority to free members of the armed forces of the US and certain other persons detained or imprisoned on behalf of the ICC. Authority: the president is authorized to use all means necessary and appropriate to bring about the release of persons described in subsection B who is being detained or imprisoned by or on behalf of or at the request of the ICC. So the following persons covered: United States people, covered allied people. So like allied people, even allies, they can invade a sovereign country, or maybe not invade, they use all means necessary, which means up to military action for allies, not only themselves. Individuals detained or imprisoned for official actions taken while the individual was covered by the US person or covered allied person, or in the case of a covered allied person, upon the request of such government. So another government who, I don't know if they're a member, they can do that. They can be like, oh, bust us out. Don't worry. The US law has a law that means they can protect other countries from the ICC, which is always great. So, and it also says here, so in the Wikipedia page, the act also prohibits US military aid to countries that are not party to the ICC. However, exceptions are made to NATO members, major non-NATO allies, Taiwan, and other countries that have entered in Article 98 agreements. So pretty much every single government who's already allied with the US and who needs to be covered. So kind of stupid it's even a thing. Let's see if I can find that. Major covered allied persons. The term covered allied persons means military personnel, elected or appointed officials, and the other persons employed or by working on the behalf of governments of a NATO member country, a major non-NATO ally, including Australia, Egypt, Israel, Japan, Jordan, Argentina, the Republic of Korea, and New Zealand, or Taiwan, for so as long as that government is not party to the ICC and wishes officials and other persons work on its behalf to be exempted from the jurisdiction of the ICC. So that's interesting. Basically, everyone they need to is covered there, except a few other Middle Eastern countries, but I'm sure Saudi Arabia has that covered themselves. So I'm not going to go too more into detail, but I'm just going to show you one last thing. So John Bolton threatens war crimes court, the ICC, with sanctions in virtual attack. US National Security Advisor calls ICC illegitimate and says we will let it die on its own. So the USA's the ICC is illegitimate to make these decisions. It's up to countries like the US to literally invade another country because there's reports, like in Libya, of their citizens about to be killed, and they are the voice who says, yeah, no, we're going to choose. We think it's legitimate. We're going to do a NATO air campaign, bomb the shit out of them. Gaddafi gets killed, and that's legitimate. If the ICC said, yeah, I think the US maybe have stepped over the line in Afghanistan a few times. No. Not legitimate, my friend. Not legitimate. John Bolton, the hawkish US National Security Advisor, threatened the ICC with sanctions and made an exaggerating attack on the institution in a speech in Washington. Bolton pushed for sanctions over an ICC investigation into alleged American war crimes in Afghanistan. He also recommended on Monday the closure of its Palestine Liberation Organization office in Washington because of its ICC inquiry into Israel. There it is, backing up his allies, as they said. The United States will use any means necessary to protect our citizens and those of our allies from unjust prosecution by its legitimate court, John Bolton said. So I'm not going to go over it again, but they're in 20... What is this? Seriously high? Oh, 2018. So as you can see, they're still well in place, still hating on the ICC, and they're going to back up Israel, as they said in their law. I think it's pretty gangster that you can have a law that gives any means necessary to get back officials who obviously committed war crimes, because wouldn't be there. The ICC would definitely not want to threaten the US even without this law if they didn't actually do anything. So they're going to go bust out criminals in a NATO country, in a sovereign country, because it doesn't. The ICC isn't to the liking the sovereignty of the United States. And then, they're obviously threatening the ICC with sanctioning it because they're going after legitimate war crimes in Afghanistan. It's pretty gangster, to be honest. Pretty outlawish. The US doing what it wants. Just create a law in its own country to invade another country. Have they got permission in the Netherlands? Not sure. But the fact you can create a law in your own country that affects another country is interesting. It's like, we signed a law today that says we can invade Iraq and we don't need to say it's got WNDs. Okay. And but anyway, I'll leave it there. Be all in the show notes as normal. I hope you enjoyed this episode of I need to get a name for it, on the Truth Over Comfort show. We'll just leave it at that. Enjoy your rest of your whatever.